Hello, Spark fans. Welcome back to Advancing Spark and Advancing AI. And hello, AI fans, I guess, because today we're not going to talk much Spark, but we are talking about Databricks. Now, there's a massive Databricks announcement a couple of weeks ago about a thing called DBRX or DBRX, which is a new open source large language model, essentially. You like ChatGPT? Well, there's a new one that's been out there that actually does some stuff. Now, normally this kind of announcement, okay, there's another one. Oh, great. You know, it's good there's competition, good things are moving forwards, but it's a lot more than that. The whole point is, one, it's open source. Two, it's incredibly fast. You're going to use it and you're used to kind of, go into one of the chats and then wait and you'll see text being generated and you're sitting there waiting for the response. And actually now you're going to log on, put some kind of prompt in and then just go, whoop, there's my response. It is way, way, way faster than you're used to in the realms of large language models. And it's very accurate and it's very open source. Now that is big, big, big messages. As these things become more accessible, as they become more open source, as we get models that can compete against the huge, expensive proprietary models that are actually trained far cheaper and perform far, far better, things are only going to get quicker and better and faster and quicker and better and faster and quicker and better. And that is good news for all of us. So there's a lot of stuff that goes inside DBRX that, yeah, you should care about and you should be very excited about. One of the first things is it was so cheap to make, and cheap in the grand scheme of things. So there were some news articles around there saying Databricks managed to train this thing, produce DBRX for about $10 million. Compared to the hundreds of millions that each version of the OpenAI models take. That is huge. If there's a brand new, technologically cutting edge version that can be produced and trained, training compute costs for that amount of money, then obviously that just means that we can do more and more iterations. It can get better and better and faster and faster. So there's a ton of stuff behind it that you really, really should care about. Okay. If it's your first time around here, don't forget to like and subscribe. Normally, I have an ace data scientist with me, but actually this is me as a layperson going through talking about what it means and also how I can use it. So this is not a walk through exactly how they trained it. We'll talk a little bit about some of the information they've shared about DBRX, but we'll get Gavi in to talk about the depths under the covers of exactly what's inside of it. But this is actually how you use DBRX and how you can just start playing with it and how you can actually start getting the most out of it. We'll dig into that stuff as well. So yeah, let's go have a look. So first and foremost, there's a big announcement. You've probably seen this big splash banner all over the place. I know I've been haunted by it recently. It is everywhere. And actually, there's two main blogs that came out at the same time. There's a wealth of information that has been published about how they managed to achieve this. It is a big deal how actually they managed to get this to work. So a big thing is, one, it's smaller than other models, but two, it kind of does things differently. They'll talk a lot in this article about it being a mixture of experts model. So whereas a lot of the big ones that we see, a lot of the huge hundreds of billion parameter models, essentially one giant model that's been trained with so much information, it can answer most questions you throw at it. This is a different approach. Still got 130 odd billion parameters that have gone in there. But actually, when you ask it a question, it doesn't ask every single thing with the context of those 130 billion parameters. It actually goes and asks a selection of them. I think there's an array of 16 individual experts that have been trained, and it picks 4 of them to answer the question each time, depending on the type of question and what you're trying to do, which suddenly means the models aren't as big. Suddenly means they're a lot quicker to answer their question because they don't have as many layers. Suddenly means all of your queries are just that much faster. Now that makes a challenge. We saw things last year with Databricks coming out with Dolly, just to prove that you can make a large language model with a smaller amount of data without spending hundreds and hundreds of millions on it. But Dolly was great to prove that point, but it wasn't as flexible. People were used to OpenAI's GPT models being able to ask it any question you could think of, and it gave you a fairly decent answer. Dolly couldn't do that. It had a much more blinkered window because it had so much fewer parameters going into it. The whole point of DBRX is that it can perform in this huge range of different tasks, from programming to writing SQL for you, performing logical questions, to giving you cookery advice, to suggesting new ideas. It can do all of those things, but actually it's a mixture of experts that do these different tasks. I mean, that's a very generic way of explaining what it's doing. It is good at a huge range of different things. Now, a lot of the things that they've tested it for are geared towards what they expect Databricks users to be wanting it to do. Answering retrieval augmented generation questions. I've got all my HR policies. Can you answer this question based on my HR policies? Here's a chunk of my document. Use this for context rather than hallucinating. Also generating code, also doing that kind of answer this based on my data model. Those kind of questions are a lot of the ones that they've tested it on and kind of really fine-tuned it on. But actually it can do so many different things. So yeah, they've been testing against a lot of the other open source ones. So you'll see it tested against Llama, against Mixtral, against Grok, against these other ones that are out there in the open source model. But they've actually been testing it and benchmarking it against 3.5 Turbo, against GPT-4 Turbo, and actually measuring how fast it can actually respond, as well as, is it good enough? There's no point in being fast if the answer's garbage. So yeah, all looking very, very good so far. I'm not going to go through absolutely everything in here. There's a huge amount of information about how they benchmarked it to make sure it was actually good. And again, in nearly all of their benchmarks, it's coming out on top. It is good with the answers that it's giving. All the things to do with surf, more context about how they trained it. But most importantly, how you can train it. Because it's open source. You can download the model off Hugging Face. You can go and have a dig through actually all of the open weights and balances they've actually got in there. You can build your own model based on what they've done here. There is a pre-trained version that is now baked into Databricks. So you can just go and use it as your favorite large language model if you want to. But that's one of the stories. The big headline is they've managed to get something that performs this well and actually answers this well. And the latency is so good. And it's open source, so people can build on it and take those ideas and take it to the next step and start this snowball of these things getting better and better and better and faster. Great. So tons and tons of information in here. Tons and tons of stuff about how they actually went and did it. One of the really interesting things is that it was actually led by the Mosaic team. Now, Databricks bought Mosaic last year. So Mosaic is now a Databricks company. It's part of the family. And this is the first real thing that we've seen come out of the Mosaic team in conjunction with Databricks. So all Mixtral, you see those models, you see kind of the various previous Mosaic outputs baked into Databricks these days. But DBRX is the Mosaic research team, it's the AI engineering team inside of Databricks now, coming out with this absolute cutting edge way of doing things, which is very, very cool. So yeah, loads of stuff in the article. There's even more stuff in this, basically how we built it. Why is it so fast? And this goes through a load of different details about how it actually works, the benchmarks they did, how they got it to meet lots of the different things. And so much of it talking about time. So much of it talking about, depending on how big the token is, how quickly it responded, how many users are actually able to use it in a decent amount of time. All this kind of stuff, measuring latency and performance. And there's kind of a big message there. So sure, when I'm just sitting there and I ask it a question and it gives me a message back and it's about reading speed when it gives it back to me. That's not what they're getting at. They're getting at maybe I've got millions of records and I want to put this through and actually have a AI-generated response for each message in that gigantic array of stuff. Current models are not fast enough to do that. I'll be sitting there waiting for hours while it just churns through, taking 10, 20 seconds per response. Doing this kind of thing, say, actually it takes, half a second, it takes milliseconds, it takes a short amount of time to give a response, suddenly means actually we can use these things at scale. We can use these things to just bake it into our ETL processes. We can make it more a transparent part of life, and that is huge. So yeah, loads more information about the mixture of experts model, how it actually works and balances that stuff. Loads of things about how it actually makes it perform. So like lots of different things they did to get the optimization working. And then there's some information about how you should prompt properly and how actually you get the most out of it and how to actually use it. Makes sense. So I'd say let's go and talk about that, right? Let's talk about how you actually use it. So take my word for it. It's pretty good, it's pretty fast, pretty accurate. We can take that based on all of the information that they've got there in terms of how they've benchmarked it. The main thing is just to try it yourself. Now, talked previously, we did a video a little while ago about these foundational model APIs. So essentially, inside of Databricks, you've had model serving previously. So if you've built a machine learning model, You can deploy that into model serving, stand up on a little simple box, give you a little web endpoint, and you can start using it. Foundational model APIs are hosted by third parties, or by Databricks, by other places, and you can hook these up, and they will look and feel like they are models that you are hosting yourself, but actually just puts it through to a third-party web service and passes it back. And you've got a mix. Some where you're paying for hosting and you just pay for the hosting. Some where you get charged on a pay-per-token basis. DBRX Instruct is now available as one of those pay-per-token foundational model APIs. Now, that is still in preview. It is not rolled out everywhere. It's currently only available in the US, annoyingly. But it's there. So you might just find out your workspace suddenly has some new features. Not just DBRX installed by default, but also a few new tools to play with things like DBRX. Things like the AI Playground, which is really cool, and I'll show you in a second. So, other things. So now in our foundational models documentation, we've now got DBRX as one of the things in the list. Explains a bit more about what it's in there. It can take 32k tokens, so you can give it a massive, massive, massive prompt, essentially, which means you can use it for retrieval augmented generation and pass a load of embeddings and all that kind of good stuff into it. And yeah, it has a system prompt. Essentially, anytime you send a prompt to it, it is prefixed by a bit of context saying, you are DBRX, this is how you work, these are the tasks that you can do, avoid stereotyping, have balanced perspectives, you shouldn't respond on controversial things, don't break copyright. All these kind of things are baked into the system prompt. So anytime you ask it a question, it already has all of this context. Now, you can override that, but that is baked in. That is how it works by default. So when we go into Databricks itself, the kind of areas that we're going to be seeing things, we've got this serving area, and that's where we've got our foundational models. You can see I've got this new bit at the top called the AI Playground, and we'll have a look at that in a second. So inside my models, I can see DBRX Instruct is part of my foundational models that had already been deployed into my workspace just for me to go and work with. Now, there is a price associated, and that is a price per token. So anytime you send tokens, anytime you receive tokens, aka any text you send to it, any text you receive back, that has a cost associated. And for DBRX, it's expensive, honestly. It's more expensive than the others comparatively. So everything's done in DBUs, or Databricks units, and that's the same way if you spin up a cluster, you'll have a price for the actual the actual VMs under the hood, which is your cloud provider cost. There will also be a DBU cost, a Databricks license fee, essentially. So when you're using these tokens, it is charging you a Databricks license fee. And that's per million tokens that you actually spend. I just zoom out a little bit. There you go. Per 1 million tokens. And that's honestly 32 DBUs. Quite chunky. That's a fairly chunky Spark cluster stood up for a couple of hours to get 32 DBUs. But then 1 million tokens is quite a few tokens. So it depends on the scale that you use in these things. I think that equates to something like £14 in UK parlance. So yeah, can be a little expensive if we compare it to the other ones, the other chat ones. So Llama, we're talking about 28 compared to 32, and the other Llama we're talking about like 28. So it's around, it's a little bit more expensive. It's not crazy. When you've got the more focused, the much more specialized, much smaller models, they're a lot cheaper. Doing embeddings models is 7 dBu, so it's a lot cheaper, but they're not general purpose models. They are completions or embeddings models. They are much more limited in the scope and size. So it does make sense. Okay, so that is actually there. That is ready to go, part of my foundation models. I've not had to do anything to set that up. That is just there. And if I click on this query button on DBRX Instruct, I've just got some snippets going. Yeah, sure, I can just slap that into my browser. A little curl token. I've got a little Python application that goes off and queries it for me. Most importantly, I've just got the SQL version of it. So again, we saw those AI functions we've now got baked into SQL that we can use, and I can pass in Databricks DBRX Instruct as one of those models and get a response baked on it. So somewhere around here in one of my playgrounds, I threw together a super quick one. We can just go and have a look, run a AI query using Databricks DBRX Instruct, and your cookbook AI suggest a recipe for a new shepherd's pie, and come back with a response. I mean, 4 seconds was a little bit slow this time, but that was mainly because it's the first thing I'd run on the cluster. So it took a second or two and then span it. Surprisingly fast in terms of generating that amount of code. It's pretty cool. But again, we don't tend to do that kind of thing in terms of when we're testing stuff out. We can test stuff out. That's why you can try different combinations and things. But we're so used to doing it in that chatbot style context. We're so used to writing a question, it coming back with something, and then having a conversational relationship with these large language models. And we might want to compare multiple language models together, especially when we're being shown a new one, being told it's great and it's fast and it does all this stuff. And we go, well, does it? Now, I could write several different AI queries and point it to different models here. It's a little bit clunky. The AI Playground is exactly for this. It's for comparing different large language models and actually saying, well, which one is better, which one's faster, which one gives a response that I prefer. All of that kind of stuff is baked into how this thing works. So I'm on the Playground. If you don't see the Playground, it's because it's not rolled out in your region yet. So I don't have it in my UK South workspace. I do not see that Playground option. It's only available, I've got my East US Databricks workspace. I don't see it elsewhere. But I can come here, I can see my Playground, and I've got a few things. One, I can choose which model I'm using. So I can see the comparative price of those different models as I'm going on, again, in DBUs. I'm going to use DBRX Instruct. I've got that system prompt. So that is automatically using that system prompt that it had in the documentation. It's automatically got that as its existing system prompt. Again, I can override that here. I can go and edit that and go, actually, no, I wanted to have a different system prompt in here. I've got some examples of things. So show me what summarization looks like, and it'll give me a prompt with some example summarization, run it for me, and then I can just customize that and do what I want with it. Or right down at the bottom, I can just start typing. I can go just give it a question and have a bit of a play with it. So I'm going to do something. I want something better than what it gave me inside that query. I mean, there's some things wrong with that query that it gave me. If we go back to my query, I mean, so yeah, shepherd's pie. Well, that's fine. Happy to help. Lamb or beef in a shepherd's pie? I mean, anyone from the UK will tell you a shepherd's pie is lamb, just lamb. If you want one of the same thing, you know, kind of a meat-based stew that has beef in it with a potato top, that's a cottage pie, not a shepherd's pie. But you know, it's fine. It's fine. Well, I'll forgive it for not knowing the difference. But if I wanted to be better at that, if I wanted to read like an actual cookbook, if I wanted to read like someone's blog and they've got loads of recipes on there, I can tell the AI Playground, actually override the system prompt. This is how I want you to act. So I can click edit, go in here, put in something, I've pre-made one. You are a cookbook assistant. For each recipe, provide a short life story that's vaguely related to the topic, then list the ingredients and the cooking method. All ingredient measures should be in UK metric. Do not mention cups to me. Cups are not a way of measuring things. Yeah, that's the blend. So that is my system prompt. That's going to override the existing one. It's going to answer in that tone. So if you're trying to do a certain tone, you should always be sarcastic and jokey. You are very formal and starting things. If all answers should be given in the form of JSON. If there is context that you want applied to each and every interaction with this model, you can override that in your system prompt, which is pretty cool. So give me a recipe for a shepherd's pie. There we go. That's what I want. Starts with a horrendously irrelevant story growing up in the lush rolling hills of the English countryside. Love it. Okay, so then we've got the recipe. Lean minced lamb. Probably because I've given it a hint that it should be British. Tells me how to do it. No mentions of cups and things. I've got milliliters for my stock. It's listened to my system prompt and it's given me the answer. But also, it's really fast. You know, it just, in terms of how quickly it actually gives you these things, is really quick. Write some example videos a person could make about Spark. Because, you know, I need to be fast doing it. And yeah, it's just fast in terms of doing the response. That's actually going a little bit slower than I normally see, possibly because I've overridden the system prompt, so now it's got a different context. And it's probably quite confused with that cookbook context as its prompt, now being told, tell me about how to do this. I'm pretty sure that's quite confused. It's now really confused going, what on earth is Spark in the context of a cookbook? That's fine. That's my own fault for giving it a bad system prompt. So that's the first piece in terms of why this is actually useful. So I can have a play with a given model and actually go, does it work? Do I like working with it? Can I use it like I would logged into an OpenAI ChatGPT kind of thing? Even better is when I compare it. So I've got this little button over here. I can add an endpoint. And I've got which model do I want in each one. So I can say, actually, what I want to do is compare it to the Llama chat. So I can go, give me some options for videos I can make about Apache Spark. Oh, it's comparative. But DBRX finished definitely quicker. Although Llama's got a bit nuts and added 3 more. Comparative speed, DBRX quicker in terms of coming out. I mean, in terms you could argue, you can look at the different things. But in terms of you're trying to figure out which is the best model for what you're trying to do, just being able to add this array of different ones, they are automatically synced. In this case, we have the synced chats done. So I can just actually sort of give it a prompt, pass that prompt simultaneously to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different models, evaluate the response that I get back. If I've built my own fine-tuned version of DBRX because I can, because it's open source, I can compare that to DBRX Instruct, and I can compare that to Llama and Mixtral and all the other ones, and then actually say, well, actually, which is the best one? Do I want the one that I have to pay for token because it's going to be more accurate based on my results? Or actually, you know what? My one's good enough, and I'm going to save a lot of money that way because I'm not going to be constantly hammering it. I'll go that way. I can actually do that comparison. I can actually sort of keep that going. So AI Playground, super, super useful. DBRX, just some amazing, amazing things that we've actually seen going in there. And I'm hoping that is just the start of a lot of innovation and iterations we're going to see coming from that Mosaic team inside of Databricks. So, yeah, lots of things in there. Huge amounts of stuff in there. So one, really quick, if you want to just plug something in and run it as part of a SQL query across hundreds of thousands of rows, you can do that. It'll be actually way, way faster than the ones you've got in there currently, but it will cost you. You'll pay per token and per output. So be careful about the use cases you use it for, but actually it's much more feasible to do it than it used to be, because you'd be paying for a Spark cluster sat there running a SQL query, paying per token, but also waiting a long time because it wasn't particularly fast. This, much, much, much faster, loads of advancements in there. And yeah, I mean, a lot of what Databricks is saying is kind of like, it's heralding like a next big leap forward in terms of how we do these things. For me, it's showing a lot of maturity in how we think about large language models. We're not fighting up this cliff of going, is the answer going to make any sense whatsoever? It's, yeah, the answer's going to be pretty good. There's ranges in terms of how good the answer is, but it's going to be pretty good. Can we make it fast? Can we make it fast enough to be useful in all these other different use cases? Now, the other thing they've said about DBRX is it's going to be baked into lots and lots of different things inside Databricks. So they've been talking about AI everywhere. The data intelligence platform, the whole point of it is AI baked in literally every stage. And all these different use cases that are currently, currently being using other large language models are likely going to be using DBRX going forwards. So as you've got things like Databricks IQ, the kind of chat assistant that's going to help you with coding and debugging of things, likely to be DBRX. As you see things like Unity Catalog naming your columns and tables, your AI-assisted search to try and find things, predictive optimization, all these different use cases where Databricks are already shoving AI anywhere they possibly can. This is only going to make it better, faster, and then hopefully we'll see even quicker evolutions and therefore more powerful use cases coming along. So there's, yeah, I'd say it's a little bit of an announcement. It's not surprising there's been so much noise about DBRX going on currently. If you've been wondering what it is, that's what it is. If you want to know all the nerdy stuff behind it, I'll put a link down below about how it actually works. Most importantly, we'll do a follow-up video lifting the lid a little bit and digging into the covers as to what are these changes? Why is it different than previous models, and how does that make it go faster? But that's not me explaining that stuff to you. And then, yeah, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.